Welcome to Season 5 of the Putback. I am SNY's NBA insider Ian Begley. This is SNY's NBA show covering Knicks, Nets, all things around the league. Season 5 premiere, and we are lucky enough to be joined by three great guests. We've got Kaz Famuyide, who's going to join us a little bit later on. Right now, we have two gentlemen who know the league as well as anyone and know the Knicks and the Celtics as well as anyone who face off tomorrow. We've got Brian Scalabrine, SiriusXM NBA Radio and NBC Boston, and we've got Frank Isola, ESPN, SiriusXM NBA. You can hear both Frank and Brian every weekday morning, 7 a.m. on the SiriusXM NBA Radio channel. Welcome to the show, everybody. And before we get into it, just a reminder, if you have any questions for us, be sure to leave them in the comments. But let's start off here with the baseline. Guys, bottom line here for this Knicks season is, are they good enough to win an NBA championship? They are all in with the Towns trade, with the Bridges trade, and with the way that they've used their draft assets. So, Brian, I want to start with you. What do you think about the talent on this roster? Is the group good enough to win an NBA title?
You know, one thing we have to bring up is the way the Knicks were acting this offseason. I really thought they did win the NBA championship. They were the toast of the town in New York. So the hard-playing, gritty, grimy team that, let's be honest, from a January on, they were the second best team in the NBA last year, especially after the OG Anunoby trade. Are they going to continue to be that team, or are they reading their press clippings because they got to the second round and they played tough? And I got to admit, I like watching them play. I think they have a great team, but it's all about their mindset. If they're going to be tough, they're going to be the same Knicks team that tried to prove everybody that they were a championship level team. They'll be just fine.
Frank, where are you on this Knicks team? Championship level?
Yeah, and I agree with Brian on a couple of things. I think Josh Hart was probably celebrated more than Jason Tatum was. Then again, neither of them played that much at the Olympics, so maybe it's somewhat even there. I love what the Knicks did. You haven't been to the final since 1999. You haven't been to the conference finals since 2000. They made a nice run last year. Obviously, injuries played into it. I love what they did during the offseason, just in terms of wanting to get better. My only issue would be, with the guys that they got rid of, I think Dante DiVincenzo gave you some mental and physical toughness. Obviously, Isaiah Hartenstein, he left on his own because he wanted to make more money. I felt like he gave you some toughness, both mentally and physically. So that would be my biggest thing. But, they're an excellent team. Come playoff time, assuming everyone is healthy, they will be a difficult team to knock out. Tom coaches them hard all year long, and Brian knows Tom as well as anybody. He played for him in Chicago. In fact, when Brian played for him, Brunson was on that staff. He knows Darren Erman from his days with the Boston Celtics. He knows Andy Greer. So Brian has pretty good, even though Brian is going to be wearing that leprechaun outfit tomorrow night up in Boston, he knows the Knicks and has a pretty close relationship with a lot of people over there.
Let's go there, guys, with Tom Thibodeau. Brian, what have you thought of the job he's done? Obviously gets the extension this offseason, so he's going to be here for a while, assuming things go well. Just your thoughts on what he's done as the head coach of this team.
Yeah, this is what I expect from Tom Thibodeau. From the very first year I played for him in Chicago when he got his first head coaching job to this year, this guy doesn't leave any stones unturned. And it's just a matter of this. His best player is Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson loves Tom Thibodeau. Jalen Brunson will run through a wall to make sure that he wins. The head coach, the best player, they're on the same page. I think their team will follow suit. So I think it's a perfect fit for Thibodeau and the Knicks.
And Frank, when you look at this group, Karl Towns, OG Anunoby in particular, injury history, does Tom Thibodeau have to adjust anything with regards to minutes, playing time, anything like that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that'll always be an issue, but I think Tom, the one thing that he does, and I heard Steve Clifford has said this to me before in the past, and when he talked about the Boston Celtics, obviously Steve Clifford coached under both Jeff Van Gundy when Tom was on the staff with the Knicks. You practice the way you want to play. You try to prepare every day like a championship team, and that's why I appreciate what Boston did last year. They finished with the best record in the NBA, and then they won the 16 playoff games. So everybody tells you that the NBA regular season doesn't mean anything. Try telling that to the Boston Celtics. They seem to take care of business, and I think Tom goes into it the same way. Brian mentioned two key names, Tom and also Rick Brunson. The one thing about the New York Knicks, I think when you look at this organization, let's give Leon Rose some credit, William Wesley, Worldwide West as well. I think the Knicks are they're just more serious of an organization. And I think that comes from your head coach and your star player. Like, it's all business with them. It doesn't mean that they don't have fun. It doesn't mean there can't be some lighthearted moments, but they're very committed to trying to win all the time. And I think that trickles down to everyone on the team. And I think you saw that from the fans last year. I think they embraced this team really like they did a lot of those teams in the 90s. It was a very likable team because they come and they play hard every night. They give everything they have. And let's face it, Ian, you know this from covering for so long. There's always up and down, peaks and valleys in NBA season. Some crazy stuff happens. But like with this Knicks squad, you always know what the goal is. It's a lot like when Pat Riley coached in New York, a lot like what Jeff Van Gundy did. It's all about trying to win a championship.
And you guys hit one of the most important things to me in the league is the top player in your locker room being on the same page as the head coach, the front office generally being on the same page as the head coach. I think that's a big recipe for success, but also Mikal Bridges, right? Let's get to some of the new guys. Mikal Bridges, the Knicks giving up 7 first-round picks to Brooklyn to get Bridges over here. Obviously, this was a big swing by Leon Rose and the group. Brian, your thoughts on how Bridges, coming from Brooklyn where he was the number one option, didn't seem to be that effective in that role. Your thoughts on how he fits into this group?
Yeah, I don't necessarily look at the offensive side of it as much as most people do. I think he comes into a league or a division or a conference where you got to stop Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. You got to have defensive versatility. He adds that to the mix. People are ignoring OG Anunoby.
Frank, Karl Towns, Knicks giving up Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, you mentioned him earlier, to get Towns. What did you think of the move? And you think, inarguably, is this a better team after the trade, or do you have to see a little bit first?
No, number one, I think maybe I screwed things up by adding another pillow because I was sitting way too low. I know Brian's taller than me. You're not, dude. So don't even try that. First of all, there was a need there.
Part of the show contract. I have to be the tallest.
Exactly. There was a need there at center. So from that standpoint, it was something that they had to do. And Karl Anthony Towns, could go down as the best, shooting big in the history of the sport. He's already won a 3-point competition. I think what he's going to add to the team. My thing for him will be come playoff time. It'll be on the defensive end. Can he rebound his position? Can he defend his position well enough? I think, being in the New York area, obviously his father knew the trade was going to happen because his father's coaching a high school team in New Jersey, and he took that job before the trade was made. So I think that they knew that this was going to happen. It wasn't going to be a surprise. I like the move. I think, Tom Thibodeau got him as a young player. I think whatever conflicts they had there, I think what always happens with a lot of players coached by Tom, after they leave, they realize that Tom had the best interests at heart, tried to make them a better player. And I think that's happened to a lot of guys in the Knicks. I like the moves that they made. My biggest issue, my biggest question about Karl will be, toughness. Mental toughness is going to be big, Ian. You know how this works. Go ask Patrick Ewing about it. You struggle in the playoffs, the fans are killing you. Patrick can handle it. Carmelo Anthony can handle it. There's a list of guys that couldn't handle it. It's got to be big. And also for Mikal Bridges, and I got to see, all of his games with the Brooklyn Nets. Mikal Bridges is a terrific player. He did not want to be the leader of that team. So in this situation, it'll be much better for him because Jalen Brunson is clearly the leader. And I think Mikal Bridges, will fit in much better as a role player on this team. And to what Brian Scalabrine was talking about before, just in terms of defending multiple positions, that certainly is going to help. He can score, but he was not comfortable being that number one or number two guy. I think he's in a much better role right here on the New York Knicks.
One thing, Frank, that interests me on Bridges is the idea that, he's not going to be their number one on offense in that starting five. But I could see him with some reserves in a unit where he's got the ball in his hands. We've seen Tom Thibodeau do that previous Knicks teams. So I could see that being the case. And I say that because there's a lot of injuries right now. Precious Achiuwa, Landry Shamet, both out. Knicks are thin. I just wonder if they tighten things up and they lean on a starter or two with some reserves to get through this stretch where these guys are hurt. I do think you would see the Bridges with the ball in his hands with those reserves. So there's plenty of decisions, plenty of options for Tom Thibodeau and co. What do you want to see, Frank, from this Knicks team night one in Boston, ring night for the Celtics, hostile environment? What are you looking at?
Yeah, so it's funny. When the season ended, we did radio the next day. And I told Brian, I said, I'm telling you what's going to happen. The league, and this wasn't too much of a stretch, I said the league is going to schedule the Knicks to play Boston on opening night. And I said the Celtics are going to get their rings. I said the Knicks will win by 30 because Tom will have the team raring to go. There was a game years ago after the Miami Heat won the championship. The Chicago Bulls came into Miami on opening night, on ring night, and beat them by, might have been 36, believe it or not. It was like a crazy score. Now, a lot of things happened since I made that prediction. Number one, Jaylen Brown didn't get selected to the Olympic team. I think he was a little ticked off at that. Jason Tatum didn't play in 2 of those games. So they come in with a bit of an edge. So from that standpoint, I think it'll be clearly a competitive game. But you know what happens, Ian, on these nights where it's about, for the Knicks, it's about this season. Opening night for the Boston Celtics is going to be about last season and getting, watching that banner go to the rafters with all the other banners that hang there, everyone getting their rings. I just think of all the teams that Joe Mazzulla had to play on opening night, this would not be the team I'd want to play if I were him, because, the Knicks will treat this like this was the game we should have been playing last year, game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals. It should have been us against the Boston Celtics. So I think the Knicks, I made a bet with Brian. I did. We eventually settled on. I gave him 15 points. I know it's insane. It's kind of it's more of a joke than anything else.
Yeah.
But this was before all the Olympic stuff. But I think the Knicks will be ready to play this game, and I think I think the game will have a feel. And I know these early games, especially sometimes they look like preseason games. I think the game will have a bit of an edge to it. I think the Knicks are going to come out hard in this one.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. Frank, I know you have to get out of here before you go. I just want to know what is on the line in that wager with Brian Scalabrine.
Well, so it's always breakfast, and you got to see this guy eat. When we go out sometimes to a diner, he'll order eggs, but also chicken. There's something weird about eating eggs and chicken at the same time. It's like, which do you eat first, the chicken or the egg? Yes. And dude, he eats like these NBA players. When you're 6'8", 6'9", he can do some damage. But he'll be up there tomorrow night. Unfortunately, I can't make that game. Have fun up there. I think it's a cool night because you're going to get to see the Celtics lift the banner. But I think for the New York Knicks and guys like Tom Thibodeau, who's won a championship there, but also Jalen Brunson, to kind of see that whole thing, I think that'll be good for the Knicks because the bar has been set really high. You could feel the excitement in New York. And the one thing you can count on, the Knicks are going to fight, which is important. They're going to take the regular season seriously, and thankfully Boston did that last season. They're not making announcements like Joel Embiid did that I'm going to be a part-time player. Those guys go all in, and it resulted in 80 wins last year. Regular season, playoffs. That's old school, and the Knicks are capable of doing that as well.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a fun atmosphere. Frank, we appreciate you and your time. And catch Frank all over ESPN, Around the Horn in particularly. And also you can catch him every morning with Brian Scalabrine, every weekday morning, Sirius XM, the starting 5 at 7 a.m. Those guys do a great job getting you up to date around the league. Frank, thanks so much.
Thanks, Ian. You become a big star. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, buddy. And we are going to now transition to my buddy Kaz Famuyide because we want to hear from Kaz. We want to hear about kind of the fan perception of this team, this group going into what is such a big season here in New York. Kaz, how are you, my friend?
Big body Begley, I'm feeling good. You know what I mean? We got some basketball championships to celebrate today, and hopefully we do the same thing in June. As a fan, I got to say, Ian, this is probably the most, I would say, anticipation and expectation I've seen from a Knicks team in my adult life. Even during the mellow years, I don't think a team had this much expectations for greatness for a team playing Madison Square Garden. I think especially after last year, it's not just about the way this team has been put together. I think it's the personality of this team, the DNA of this team, knowing how they were built from the ground up. Tom Thibodeau, the way he coaches. And, of course, it starts at the top with Captain Jalen Brunson. And just seeing what they went through as far as adversity last year, how couldn't you be excited about this Knicks team when you see all the pieces they added, the stars and Karl Anthony Towns, and just knowing that the Eastern Conference is to be had. Repeats are hard. The Boston Celtics are a great basketball team, but we haven't seen a repeat champion in quite some time. So if there's any time to be excited about this Knicks team, I don't see why it wouldn't be this year when you have 2 bona fide All-NBA guys and 3 of the best wing defenders in the entire NBA.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the best team that's been put together. Kaz, I would agree with you. Since the turn of the since 2000, I would say 99, 2000, when they were still competing. And so, yeah, they're right there. And it's going to be interesting all year long. We're going to have you covered here all year long. Reminder, if you have any questions, please throw those questions into the replies wherever you're watching, the comments wherever you're watching, and we'll try to get to them at the end of the show. Now, Kaz, you talked about where this team is in a big picture sense. In a smaller sense, they are struggling with injuries right now. Landry Shamet hurt, Precious Achiuwa hurt, Landry Shamet having to be cut for several different reasons, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But somebody who's healthy, Josh Hart, and we're going to get into him here with the What We Learned segment, and that is presented by SUNY Binghamton University. So we're going to tell you what we learned about Josh Hart during the preseason. Hart was on the record saying that he's kind of lost a little bit in his role offensively, and clearly he's not a focal point offensively. He's not going to get a ton of shots, but I think he's a rhythm player. This is something that he talked about early last season when he wasn't getting a ton of shots. He's a guy who needs to touch the ball, needs to get it up, needs to take some shots in order to be comfortable. So this is something that the Knicks are going to have to work out, whether it's Hart being comfortable in a new role or the Knicks finding him and getting him a little bit more involved on offense, because he is such an important part of this team, as we've learned over the last 2 years. So that's kind of where I am with Hart. Kaz, what are your thoughts there with Hart coming into this season?
I think my thoughts are there's going to be some growing pains. There was a lot of changes from the roster from this year to last year. And obviously, when the Knicks suffered a ton of injuries last season, the revelation of Josh Hart was one of the best stories in the NBA. I mean, I called him the Carmelo Anthony of Draymond Greens because he essentially played like Draymond Green for a lot of these games without the technical and flagrant fouls, right? He can get rebounds, he'll push the break. And the great thing about him is you don't really need to draw anything up for him. He's an effort player. He's a guy who is best at crashing the boards and pushing the offensive break and getting Jalen Brunson off the ball. And now you got incredible wings in OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges, and probably the best trail big man the game's ever seen in Karl Anthony Towns on those fast breaks. So there'll definitely be easy opportunities for Josh Hart to get back into that rhythm and, see some of the great things he did last year and in the postseason. But to think that this is like NBA 2K and it's going to put players together and it's all going to work in the first 3 preseason games is just not realistic. So I think, Josh Hart is probably going to be the person who probably has to do the most, changing as far as his game is concerned, because you kind of know where Mikal Bridges is going to get his shots. You know where OG is going to get his. You know the ball is going to be in Brunson's hand, and you know what Karl Anthony Towns is going to do. So I'm not of the thought of Josh Hart coming off the bench. I think he works best as a starter with this rotation. He just got to get his shots and get his opportunities where he can get them.
Yeah, I agree. I think that he is the best fit for this starting 5. And if you do something where you're changing the starting 5 based on Hart's shot attempts, I think that's maybe the last way to go to try to fix it. There's so many other ways to go to fix it. And, this is what everybody gets paid the big bucks for, including the coaching staff and Tom Thibodeau, to figure these things out. Let's get into the injury news here. Precious Achiuwa, hamstring issue. Is going to be out for a few weeks here. The Knicks announced yesterday. And so you're looking at the first few weeks here without Precious Achiuwa, without Landry Shamet, who dislocated his shoulder during the preseason. And the Knicks are thin, right? They're thin off the bench. Pacome Dadier, Miles McBride. You got, obviously, pardon me, getting a text here. Pacome Dadier, Miles McBride. And I think when you look at the bigs, though, without Achiuwa, you're going to lean on Jericho Sims. You're going to lean on Ariel Hukporti. And so the bigs, to me, off the bench are a concern. But, Kaz, I think that what you're going to see is a starter or 2 mixed in with the bench unit. I don't think it's going to be, Campaign, Tyler Kolek, and the whole bench unit out on the floor. I think you're going to see Mikal Bridges with the bench. You're going to see maybe a different starter with the bench where there's a player on the floor who you can rely on to get you buckets off the dribble, like a Bridges. So I don't think we're thinking of a 5-man bench unit here with the Knicks, but still, front line, shooting, they're compromised off the bench. How do you think they make this work?
Well, it's unfortunate because I feel like the Precious Achiuwa we saw last year was going to be different from the Precious Achiuwa we saw in the first couple of games in the preseason. He largely played out of position last year. He was a backup center. He's only about 6'8", 6'9", and he did an admirable job doing it. But in the first few games of the preseason, you got to see him back in his natural position as the four, and he was great. I mean, he was creating off the dribble. He was hitting open three-pointers. He's obviously still being a great defender and rebounder off the bench. And, he was a big part along with Deuce McBride, which made that bench unit sort of go. But if there's any time to get injured, like anybody would always say, the beginning of the year is probably the best time for it, especially if you're trying to have a long postseason. But I do like what the Knicks did to shore up the depth after losing a lot of pieces this past year. I've become a big fan of Dadier, 3-Pac, as Knicks Twitter is starting to call him recently. He's shown that he's great off the dribble. I mean, off the ball, just as far as like establishing himself to get himself good opportunities and good shots. I think we got a lot of love for Tyler Kodak as well out of Marquette. He's been really good. Miles McBride is going to be really good. But the front line is going to be an issue. And as great as Karl Anthony Towns is for everything he brings you as an offensive player, there's always going to be those questions about how strong that front line is going to be. And what the Knicks really relied on last year was that toughness inside the paint. People did not like going into the paint. And there was times where it would either be Julius Randle down there, Mitchell Robinson down there, lots of guys down there that aren't wearing Knicks uniforms this year, or at least for the first few months. So losing Precious Achiuwa is definitely going to be something that they have to, shore up for. But there are some bright spots out there. I think Porty really turned a lot of eyes in the Olympics and now in the preseason. So there could be an opportunity for him to really shine. I mean, Jericho Sims, we've seen him for the past several years be a very great athlete, but now we really need to see him put together the skills to match up that athleticism. But I'm really excited about the rookies, Kolek and 3-Pac, man. Like, I think these guys are going to be able to at least hold the fort down for the first couple of weeks until that relook at that hamstring with Precious Achiuwa. Hamstrings are tricky, man. You never know as far as bone breaks, but when it's a muscle, when it's a thigh, when it's something like that, you never really know how severe it could be. So it could be a little bit of a hurdle for the Knicks early in the season.
Yeah, certainly. And getting to also Kaz Landry-Shamet, the Knicks waived him after he got hurt, after he dislocated his shoulder. Now, I know that there was initial optimism that he can avoid surgery there and just rehab this thing and get back on the floor. There's been no update to that effect. The Knicks just said they're going to reevaluate him at a later date. But I do think that they will leave a roster spot open as Shamet rehabs, and until it's determined that, yes, he does need surgery, I think they'll leave that thing open, see how his rehab goes, because they would like to, I think, bring him back in a perfect world. World, obviously, he doesn't get hurt and he helps them off the bench, but he got hurt. I think they would like to get him back here if he can get himself back on the floor. A lot of salary cap gymnastics with the Knicks being so close to that second apron, but I do think they'll leave a spot open for him as long as he's continuing to progress back to the floor.
For sure. And I think a lot of Knicks fans get a lot of deja vu watching that shoulder hang that happened to Landry-Shamet. Felt very Julius Randle-like after that Miami game. But I will tell you this, man. It's the benefit of being a good team with expectations. Even if Landry-Shamet isn't as healthy as he was coming into the season, when you're a good team, vets want to play for you. Vets would give you the 5 or 10 minutes needed, whether it's shooting, whether it's rebounding, whether it is. So even if Landry-Shamet isn't as good to go in a few weeks when he rehabs or whatever, the benefit of having a really good team with expectations is there will be no shortage of great vets out there that would love to come and put on the Knicks uniform and fill in the role of being a spot-up shooter, of being a rebounder, of being a defender. So Shamet, who I thought filled in a really good role in the preseason, got a tough break with that injury. I hope he does better. I hope he gets better. But the good thing about the Knicks is the top line talent is taken care of. It's about filling in the rest of the roles like shooting, defending, and rebounding that'll really determine how far this Knicks team goes.
It's a great point. It's about the guys at the top. It's about the starters. Yes, these injuries for reserves certainly hurt. They impact what you want to do, and then they impact how you react to them. But it is about the guys at the top, Kaz. I fully agree with you. Speaking of guys at the top, Matt Spenley, social media C-suite exec here at SNY. He's going to join us right now on the talkback because Matt has been taking your questions in the comments wherever you're watching our show. He's going to bring some questions to us, and we're going to talk through them, and we're going to have some fun. Matt, what's going on?
Fellas, how we doing? Currently
you,
today, good to see you too, Kaz. I am, along with the rest of the SY office, mourning the end of the 2024 Mets season. But, Kaz, I know you're a Yankees guy. How you feeling about the World Series?
Hey, listen, this is a heavyweight title fight between two extremely incredible franchises in the Yankees and the Dodgers, all the history, all of the money that's been poured into both of these teams. And if you're a casual baseball fan like me and many other people out there, this is the perfect time to watch. You got Shohei on one side, Aaron Judge on another, Soto, Mookie. I mean, it's going to be an incredible World Series. But Yankees in 6.
All right. You've been rubbing it in
go.
enough. Let's move on. Ian, I know you brought up as you guys were talking here about the the star players that are going to be what determines this Knicks season. I want to start out with a question from me about Mikal Bridges, who has shot 2 for 19 from 3 in the preseason, has struggled. I know we talked a little bit about Hart, obviously, in terms of his role, but any concern about Mikal's shooting? I know it's been a thing in Knicks Twitter. People are talking about, does he have a hitch in his shot? His shot looks a little different. You have any concern about Mikal's shooting in a brief preseason sample size?
Look, I think it's fair to have a little concern, right? Whenever you see that kind of shooting number and then you see the form, it looks like it's changed a bit. It looks like the release is higher up. And so obviously he's still getting comfortable with what he wants the shot to be and how he wants it to feel. And so I guess that may take, a little bit of the regular season here. But I wouldn't be overly concerned until you get into, December 1st, and then he's really struggling from 3. I think that's when you get concerned. But I think he's a veteran. He's shown that he can adjust his shot and make shots. He did that early on in his career. So give him the benefit of the doubt, and let's see what the results are after the first 3-4 weeks of the season.
Kaz, you feel
Definitely
the same?
a little
Any
concern. A little bit. I can't lie. I mean, we all have eyes, right? Like we've seen the change in his shot there, and of course, in the back of every Knicks fan's mind, they're going to be thinking about, we gave up 6 picks for this, So, but in any case, Mikal Bridges, even as his shot has changed over the years, has still been a consistent scorer in the NBA. He's played high-level basketball everywhere he's been, and even as a member of the Brooklyn Nets, a team that didn't have a ton of expectations for the years he was there, he was still a solid contributor, and that's really all you're asking him to be as a New York Knick. Now, if he's the guy that you need to rely on in crunch time with in the playoffs, and there's no Brunson and no Towns and no OG, then okay, maybe there's a little bit more to worry about. But I think Mikal Bridges is a guy who prides himself on his hard work, like all these Nova guys, and I feel like it'll be something that's in the past, hopefully, by the time we get to Christmas.
For sure. And I think, Kaz, you mentioned the closing lineups too. I personally am incredibly curious once we get down to those crunch time, even if it's the Celtics tomorrow, who's going to be closing for the Knicks. I think we might see different units on a game-to-game basis. Want to jump, I know we talked about the lineup a little bit too, Ian. This is from our guy David Futternick from YouTube. Who should start, Deuce or Hart? Also, movie question, The Town or The Departed?
I do think Josh Hart should be the starter. Not so much just about Josh's offensive output, but I do think Deuce McBride, I'd love to see him with the ball in his hands with the second unit. I think this is definitely a year where he takes another leap offensively. He kind of is giving me Emmanuel Quickley vibes from 2 years ago when he was just a guy who was just explosive off the bench. And, a lot of times with young guards, especially in this league, you don't necessarily want to throw them right into the starting lineup, especially with the team that has a ton of expectations. Sometimes being that 6th starter in a contending lineup is just as important as any other position on an NBA team. And I think Deuce McBride fits that role perfectly as a guard who, you look at some of these great teams around the NBA. You look at Boston, you look at Minnesota, you look at Denver, you look at Dallas. They all have very good guards off the bench that can have nights where they could go off for 15, 20, 25 points. And as good as Josh Hart is, I think his benefit to this team is about everything else. It's not about scoring with him. He can get you points, yes, but it's his ability to defend. It's his ability to rebound. It's his ability to push the break and get all four of those offensive weapons running. And, when Josh Hart is on the fast break, he's a very underrated playmaker as far as like fast break points are concerned. So I like the ball in his hands with those four guys there. And now, will he knock down the occasional open jumper? That's something that he'll have to do with this lineup. And I don't necessarily see us, injuries provided. We don't necessarily see him having a lot of those 15, 20-point games out there. But if he's out there getting 9 rebounds, 4 or 5 points, a steal here and there, just filling up the stat sheet, I think that's the perfect sort of position for Josh Hart. And I don't think Deuce McBride can do that with a lineup of Jalen Brunson, OG, McHale, and Cat starting in the lineup. So I stay sticking with Hart at the starter.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Deuce's shooting we saw at times in the postseason also was massive for the Knicks. Ian, question back to you from YouTube. Nostalgic Nick. It's one of the Nostalgic Nick. It's a tongue twister. One of those you see it and it makes sense, but you try to read it and it's more difficult. Why haven't the Knicks signed 2 more centers yet? So just check in for us as they deal with the Precious Achiuwa injury. Is there anything that should be on our radar in terms of them adding to the roster? I know you mentioned they'll leave a spot open, see how Shamet injury goes, but anything we should be aware of there?
So that's pretty much it because of the second apron, right? They're hard capped from a team salary standpoint at the second apron. And I think they have, but the total that they have can fit a veteran minimum deal and it can fit a rookie that they've drafted on a converted deal. So I would still expect at some point for them to convert Ariel Hukporti's deal from a 2-way deal to a standard rookie contract. And then they have room to add someone on a veteran's minimum, whether it's Landry Shamet or someone else. So those are the things to look at there. I don't think they would go ahead and add a big at this point. For me, adding a big would maybe come via trade. And that's the other interesting thing here with the Knicks and leaving those roster spots open, because when you have open roster spots, you could take back, several players in a deal where maybe you don't have the same flexibility if you don't have those spots. Now, I correct me. Someone would need to correct me if I'm wrong. I think the Knicks can take back multiple players even if they're above the first apron, but the roster flexibility is kind of the big theme here, waiting to see how things shake out. We're waiting to see on how Shamet does with his rehab. Again, I think there was optimism early on with that he could avoid surgery, eventually get back on the court. But as far as signing a big in particular, I don't think that's the route they will go early on. The date to remember here, I believe, is November 3rd, because at that point, the Knicks have to be at 14 players. Right now, they have 12 players. They'll go into the season with 12 players. Got to get up to 14 by November 3rd or 4th, and that's where the Knicks will have to make a move, and that's where we'll know more about what their plans are, both backup center and other positions.
Sorry, Ian, I'm just the social media guy. I'm not your capologist. So if you want cap points, I'm going to have to bring somebody else in here, or have to outsource that. All right, I got a fun one for you guys before I get back to a Knicks question, because the conversation earlier and that Frank and Brian were talking about breakfast, diners were brought up. What's the go-to diner order? We're in New York. Diners are the best. Kaz, I'm starting with you. Go-to diner order. I'm talking breakfast, brunch time.
I'm a simple guy, man. I need my savory and my sweet in the combination. So I need the pancakes, scrambled eggs, cheddar in there. And depending on which day it is, sometimes I'm feeling bacony. Sometimes I'm feeling like some Taylor ham. Sometimes I go with some pastrami. But the scrambled eggs got to be in the cheese, and the pancakes got to be real syrupy for sure. Probably why I got to lose a little weight, but that's my goal.
Diners are worth it, man. Ian, how about you?
Man, look, maybe 15 years ago, I'm going with Kaz's order every morning because that's amazing. Now, older guy, got to watch my weight and all that fun stuff. My wife always orders it's a egg sandwich, egg wrap, where the eggs are well done. There's cheese on it. It's very simple. It's healthy. So sadly, and it's very sad for me to say this out loud, that's probably the best thing I can order off of a diner menu in the morning. And I'm no fun there. So sorry about that, Matt. But that's where I'm at.
I'll be there one day with you, Ian. I'll be there one day with you.
Yeah.
We'll all just go behind you. That's all. Get the spinach omelet with the power omelet. That's all you need.
Egg whites. Yeah.
I'm much more along Kaz's lines. But you know what I love? A nice biscuit, too. If you can get a nice biscuit with a little always a good touch.
Grits and some cheddar grits in there, too.
Oh, Kaz, grits.
Fire.
Dude, grits are the
Only
best.
only a
Oh,
Sunday
man,
though. Only a Sunday. You do that during
it's
the
true.
week,
It's a treat.
I'm useless.
I got to log off and go hit Port Washington Diner. I'm sorry.
That's what I'm doing. I'm just making everybody hungry right here, but that's all good. All right, let's
It's
pop back
all
to the next
good.
one. Nick Strike Back on YouTube's asking, any chance the rookies get any playing time? Paco Dadier in particular. I know Kolek, Kaz, you mentioned him before. He's a guy that I think people, see could be a little ahead of schedule. But just Ian in general, do you think that one of these rookies could potentially enter Tom Thibodeau's rotation earlier than we expect?
I mean, you look at the numbers, right? I think the numbers tell you that somebody has to, whether it's Tyler Kolek or Pacome Dadier. And I think late in this preseason, I was told that Dadier had really played better or surpassed some of the Knicks' internal expectations for him. And so, I could see him getting some minutes, getting some rotation minutes here, especially because of the position he plays with Kolek. Obviously, you have Cam Payne, you have Miles McBride, so it's less of a clear path for him to get on the floor. That's why I think Dadier, if you're trying to figure out which rookie is going to get in that rotation, I would lean him before Kolek. But make no mistake, Kolek has also impressed everybody in the organization with where he is now and where he could be in the future.
There were some people in the YouTube comments that wanted, Dadier to start as soon as tomorrow. So you kind of see where the level of excitement is for him.
I love me some Dadier on draft night. I thought he was going to be one of those guys that are drafted and stashed and packaged in a deal for some star player. And every time I see him on the court, I'm like, this guy should be playing on opening night. I mean, he's a guy who plays like he doesn't need anything ran for him. Watching him reposition himself on the court is stuff that you see in textbooks, see in instructional videos, and his length and athleticism is a lot. There's a lot more there than I think even the biggest, most optimistic Knicks fan thought there would be with Paco Dadier. I think with Tyler Kolek, though, I think you know what you were getting with him. I think a lot of Knicks fans are fans of the Big East, fans of the tournament here in Madison Square Garden, and anybody who's watched him over the years in Marquette knows that he's a dog, and he has played some incredibly high-level basketball in the Garden already in his young career. And in the summer league and in the early parts of the preseason, he hasn't done anything to quell those notions. So I think Kolek and Dadier will get some playing time early this season. Do they play tomorrow night? I don't think so, but if they do and they show out, that might be the best case scenario. We're talking about Shamet, we're talking about Precious, all these guys that are probably not going to be around for the first couple of weeks of the season. If Kolek and Dadier overtake expectations and play better than expected, that low key might be the best case scenario for the Knicks, where you don't need to go and get a veteran. You don't need to go and find somebody to fill up these roles. You got them right there on the absolute cheapest contracts you can have for a team. So who knows? Maybe they just fell into a happy accident. We'll see this week.
We'll see how it plays out. And it all starts tomorrow. So, guys, final question. Let's get your predictions for the season. Ian, let's start with you. How's this going to play out for the Knicks?
Yeah, I'm going to go third seed in the East, 48 wins or so. I do think between Philadelphia and Boston, I think Boston, obviously, we know why they could be ahead of the Knicks. Philadelphia, I think they will get something right here with Paul George, with Embiid's health, with Maxey, and who they picked up to back those guys up. I think they're going to be a strong regular season team. So, yeah, 3 seed, 48, 49 wins, and you see where the chips fall in the postseason.
I'm gonna hit Ian with the Price is Right and go 50 wins for the Knicks. just go one more above them. But yeah, I think the Philadelphia 76ers, I know the big splashy names have been Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, but they picked up a lot of really solid veterans on that bench as well, and they're deep. So I think between them, the Boston Celtics, a healthy Giannis, and 1 year of Damian Lillard with the Milwaukee Bucks, I can see the New York Knicks being a 2 or 3 seed, but I truly believe this is their year. I truly believe the pieces are going to fall their way, and they're finding themselves in the NBA Finals this year. Repeats are hard. We don't see a ton of them anymore this year because there's so much parity in the league. The league is so deep. Injuries happen all the time. And the Celtics are already dealing with a big injury in the beginning of the season with Kristaps Porzingis, and who knows how much that will change the trajectory of the season, where last year the Boston Celtics just steamrolled from day one. So that being said, I think there's something in the air. I think a World Series will be here in a couple days. think the Liberty will be coming down, the Canyon of Heroes in a couple of days as well. And I think in June of this year, we will finally, first time since 1973, celebrate a New York Knicks NBA championship. I think in my heart of hearts and in all my basketball watching knowledge, this is truly the year for the New York Knicks.
We got to clip that,
From your
guys.
lips to God's ears. Oh, don't worry. I already noted it. It's already been noted.
Come on,
It's
now.
already been
I'm
noted.
with it.
Let me know. All right. That's what I got for you today, guys. So,
All right. Thank you,
Well,
Matt
Thank you
Spenley.
so much, brother.
of course,
Thank
guys.
you, Kaz Famuyide. We appreciate you, man. Thanks for jumping on with us. Thanks to everybody for checking us out, sticking with us through some technical difficulties, and we will be back here on the Putback October 29th, next Tuesday. We're going to be back with you, breaking things down, Knicks' first week of the season, looking ahead to see where things go from there. So be sure to stay with us. Coming back to you next week. But before we go, just want to note here, somebody who's on Knicks Twitter, maybe you're not on Knicks Twitter, but if you are on Knicks Twitter, maybe you know a gentleman by the name of Papa Left. Papa Left is going through a tough time right now, he and his family. So I've got he and his family in my thoughts and in my heart. And if you could too, just keep him in your thoughts, keep he and his family in your thoughts. They're going through a tough time, and we wish him the best. We wish his family the best. And thank you, everybody.